Blog Talk Radio.
Peace, Baragani, Islam, Salam, Hatep, Rahubat, Jinalako Ninani, Chief Noble Bandele, El-Amin, back again for another show, as I should say. Today's show, we're going to be dealing with the real purpose of the Civil War. You know, many people have talked about different variations of what the war was for, and we're going to talk about that, and we're going to get in depth about the secret hidden agenda behind the Civil War. Okay, so before we get into any of that, please check out all of my books. You can find my books on Amazon. You can find the books on the treaties, because treaties is becoming the big thing again, and the treaty information, you know, is starting to become very important in understanding. Okay, so, you know, you check out my Morse Treaties books. I have 2 of those, and then, you know, just check me out under Bandele El-Amin, Bandele El-Amin, and you know, I appreciate the support. Also, please check out indigenous.webs.com. It is your one-stop shop for Moorish indigenous lawful needs. So I was supposed to have tonight, King El-Bay was supposed to jump on here with me tonight, but unfortunately, he probably went to sleep on me tonight. But I definitely want I want to try to do the show again, or, you know, maybe get him on another venue, and we can still discuss a little bit of this, because he has definitely got some insight on it. And please check out King El-Bay, his videos, and he also has a book on child support. So look up Keng El-Bay and on Amazon, and you can find this book on child support, because he's got some real good tactics on how to deal with that situation. So, you know, and he's got some videos, and he's also on Facebook. You can also check me out on Facebook and on Instagram, you know. But enough said of that. You know, the real purpose of the Civil War is the theme of the day, and I do have something to look at about that before we jump into it, because you know, it's an article. It's a CNN article. I know a lot of times we don't look at CNN like we need to, but I mean, you know, being that it's kind of been slanted, but this was an interesting article, because you got a governor. Okay, the topic. The heading is Maine governor, like the state Maine, okay? The governor of Maine, Paul LePage. He says that Civil War was initially fought over land, not slavery. Okay, and this article goes back to August 22nd, 2017. Okay, so this is not a recent article, but nonetheless. Now, you know, even before I get into this, what even sparked my thought, or what sparked this whole thought on the Civil War, was me watching, I was watching a Blog Talk show. I was watching a Blog Talk not Blog Talk, but a blog of Killer Priest. Killer Priest has a podcast, okay? Killer Priest podcast. He had Maxwell Jordan. So I don't know if many people are familiar with Maxwell Jordan, but he's what we call a conspiracy theorist per se, but he's also versed in the occult information. Okay, he's been around for years. I mean, I remember watching my first video of him talking about the Illuminati probably back in like 98 or something like that. So he's been around for a while. Actually he's been around for like 60 years, been teaching this stuff, right? He's an older guy, but he was on Killer Priest podcast the other night, and he made mention about the Civil War, okay? And basically what he was saying was the Civil War was not fought over slavery. So he goes into furtherness, but his conversation is basically what sparked this blog, okay? Because slavery, we always, the thing about the Civil War is there's a lot of thought and historical theory about it really not being about slavery, okay? And we've heard these before. But what Maxwell kind of went into was he talked about the property, America being allodial or property, okay, alluding to that and saying that this was more about that than it was about slavery. So not to spoil the whole conversation off the rip, but that was what sparked the conversation that me and King El Bay had on what really was going on. So with all that being said, I'm going back to the article now. The article was saying that the Maine governor defended monuments. Okay, so this was about the monuments of the Confederacy, but he was just saying that he claimed that it was like 7,600 Mainers that fought for the South and all that stuff now. But what he said, this is what he said. He said, what was the war? If you really, truly read the study of Civil War, it turned out into a battle for the slaves. But initially, he said it was that these 7,600 Mainers fought for the Confederacy. He's a Republican that said in an interview, he said on a radio station, WVOM, and then he said that, and they fought because they were concerned about, they were farmers. They were concerned about their land, their property. It was a property rights issue as it began. The President of the United States, who was a very brilliant politician, made it about slavery to a great degree. Okay, now, I will say that I don't think, like, they try to debunk him, you know what I mean, on the article. And I'm not saying that he wasn't accurate on all accounts of the story, because I don't know if 7,600 Maine people from Maine fought in the civil rights. I mean, that sounds like a lot of people, you know, and they may claim that it wasn't that many. That state was very adamantly not for that, you know, not for civil war or anything. So, you know, that's kind of hard to believe. But what rang bell with what Maxwell Jordan had said, or Jordan Maxwell, that it was fought over property. Okay. Now, what was being mentioned was that the United States was set up for allodial property. So, like, everybody had the right to land, and you know, when you look at the history, you know, when you look at the history of it, you'll see that the beginning of, my fault, I'm trying to text. I got my other brother who's my co-host that comes on. I think he's going to join the line. So, but anyway, the purpose of America was, you know, to kind of get away from those people. It was kind of to get away from, you know, the tyranny of the kings and queens. So when they created the Americas, you know, as a nation, they wanted to have the same rights as king and queens, you know. So they created this allodial property, you know. All right, I think my brother Jamil's on now, so let me bring him on. Peace, God.
Peace, God. What's going on, man?
Oh man, nothing much, man. I'm talking about the Civil War, man. I'm talking about the real purpose of the Civil War. Okay, so I don't know how much you know about this particular perspective on it. You know what I mean? But basically, we're talking about the fact that the Civil War it wasn't basically fought for slaves, which you probably heard that before. But the fact that it was fought really for allodial property. And what they mean by that basically that it was a big deal about taking the sovereignty of America away from the people. Okay. Meaning that, you know what I mean? And this is a spark off from I was watching a podcast with Killer Priest, and he had a guy on there called Jordan Maxwell, and he made mention of this. And so it got me thinking, it sparked my head off and got me going. And I started making some connections to what he was saying, because he basically, his premise was that the Civil War was fought to take away the property from the American people. Okay. And okay, so what I'm looking at and seeing, okay, like, so if that's the premise, because America was, in the beginning, America was a sovereign nation that had, the people had the right to property, and they had the right to straight out own the property. What they call that is allodial property. So they owned that property all right out. Like, they didn't have to pay nobody. They didn't have to pay taxes on it like that or any of that nature. They owned the land. Okay. But that changed after the Civil War. You know what I'm saying? That's where the premise was that it really wasn't about the slave. It wasn't like slavery was a small part of it, because ultimately, when you talk about slavery, we talk about property, because those people were property. Right. You know what I'm saying? So when we look at it, because we look at it as, oh, you know, black people were being, you know, freed from this and that, but not really looking at the fact that if the powers to be or the government itself was looking to take away the property from the people, that meant they was going to take away slavery. In the two, slavery was a part of taking away people's property, because slaves were property. Right. Okay. So it's like, right. So I mean, that's kind of where I'm going. So let me stop there and let me see where you feel on that.
I mean, I just know for sure it wasn't about, you know, abolition. You know how the typical story that we get is, you know, that they was fighting to end slavery. Is for democracy and justice and equality and kindness and loving for all people. But yeah, I haven't heard that one before. I knew it was something economic about it. You know, I know that the economy was kind of changing, or they wanted to change the economy or the workforce, but I haven't heard that one though before. And that's very interesting.
Okay, and you're right, because I heard that too. As far as economy, you know, the North wanting to do it a certain way, and that's true. I do believe that was part of the plan, was to change the North, or the government was looking at like getting rid of slavery in that form and becoming more to going into industrial revolution, with the industrial age, you know. So that, I think that played a part too. You know, but that, I think the other part of it was that the fact that they couldn't have the American people owning all that land. They didn't want the American people to have the right to property. And the only reason why I say that is because today, in 2021, people don't own anything anymore because the dollar is no longer a real money. You can't really pay for anything because what we call money doesn't exist. We use what we call Federal Reserve notes or notes, and they only bear debt, and because they only bear debt, we really can't pay for things. So we really don't own anything. We don't really own anything. So we really don't own our land no more. Anything we buy, we really don't buy it. So we really don't own it. Okay, if that makes sense. And so, because of that, I'm looking at where it started at, because all these things about the corporation having the power it has, and how people have issues with when people have issues with the whole finance, the whole the debt, the economy, the debt, all that stuff is because of the lack of real currency in the United States. And it started back then when they started after the Civil War. Then that's when you start to see corporations become big. You start to see corporations become, getting more power right after the Civil War. Okay, you got the 14th Amendment that created a loophole for corporations to be considered people or persons. So it's because of the Civil War, a lot of things have changed with America. I mean, before the Civil War, there was no such thing as a United States citizen. Before the 14th Amendment, there was no United States citizen. You was a citizen of your city, your state, and you were considered a United States, but you were not, you was mostly connected to your state. The state had more, they had more sovereignty. The states had more sovereignty in the beginning, and things of that nature. And so you can see that this gradual shifting from American people having power over themselves, owning things, to a point where now everybody is basically in debt and nobody even owns anything. Most people rent stuff. Even on a mundane level, most people are paying for their car or paying for they don't own anything. They all, the banks own the house. Everybody's paying, leasing, So, my thing is it stemmed out of the Civil War. Based on what I heard from Jordan Maxwell saying on the Killer Priest podcast. Do you watch Killer Priest podcast? I don't know if you're doing that.
I've seen a lot of them. I haven't seen it lately though.
Okay, but yeah, so he be having some brothers on. He be having a lot of interesting guests on this show, and like I said, Jordan Maxwell is an old head. He's been around for 60 years. He's a very old guy, and he breaks down a lot of this esoteric meaning behind a lot of the legal stuff that's going on. But he did make mention of the Civil War, and I just started putting it together because the whole thing about property in blacks have always been property to the United States. I mean, not having property to somebody. The government used to look at them as property, and the Dred Scott case made mention of that. The Dred Scott case said that basically, he don't have the right to sue or anything, and that he's property, and that because slaves are property, and that the fact that the United States has the right to life, liberty, and property, that these people were entitled to slaves because they were property. And so they made this big thing in the Dred Scott case about the fact that these black slaves were property. So when you get when this campaign about the Civil War come up, and they're talking about taking away Southerners' slaves, they basically are saying they're trying to take away their property.
Right.
Okay. and when we think of property, most of the time we think of property like what? Land or something, like housing, land or some stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But everything is property. Everything, like me and Brother King, like he was supposed to be on here tonight too, you know what I'm saying, but he didn't make it. But King definitely talks about how everything that we do deals with property rights. It deals with some kind of real estate or something. Everything deals with property. And so hearing all these things coming together and it's clicking like, well, dang, taking away, like the fact that they try to make it where it was about slavery, and they try to put that into the forefront of the
right.
It's right. And so before you had got on here, I had read this article that was from a 2017. He was a governor of Maine, and he kind of came out and said that this is what he said. He said basically that they fought the war. The Civil War was not about slavery. He said the Civil War was not about slavery. And I'm trying to read. He said it was a property right issue. That's what he said. He said that it was a property rights issue.
Mm-hmm.
So this is you know what I'm saying, this is he's a Republican governor of Maine that actually said this. And then he says the slaves were considered property up to and during the Civil War. So he's making mention of that, and it's like, oh, okay. So, because I kind of started looking up stuff, like, where's this connection coming from? And this was an article I found. It was on CNN Politics. Now, CNN tried to say that they got some historians to come in and try to say that's nonsense. Like, oh, he's talking crazy. That's misinformation and ignorance, because he tried to also say that it was like 7,600 people from Maine who fought in the Civil War. So they was really to say like, nah, that wasn't right, which that may not be true. But that doesn't take away my thoughts from the fact that there was a Civil War that might have been fought based on something besides slavery. I still think that he was on to something there, and so that's kind of where my thoughts was on it, man.
So what do you think about, like all that, like even on, for us to have been labeled property and for that narrative, to ride like that? I mean, like, is that something like, because I think at some point, we should begin to change the narrative, They say we property. What do we say we is? Do we agree with them? I know that you say, we, you try to, adjust the dynamic of it by bringing in the Moors, and that does change it. I mean, does that kind of tie in with it? Like, because I'm assuming it is, we're talking about, war, slavery, property. I mean, I don't know. I think, at some point.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that the Moors play a part because the treaties, like the treaty with Morocco allowed those melanated people who made a tie to Morocco, they allowed them to not be really scrutinized as property. But anybody else that was not necessarily under the designation of a Moor could have been and were enslaved and were considered property. So, I mean, like, that's a direct, consideration about, property. The fact that treaty was when you look at the Dred Scott case, Chief Justice Taney, I think it was Taney, Taney, he said that basically there was no law that a white man had to, had to abide by any black guy person. There basically was no laws that were in place that allowed so-called black or people, people of melanation. It did not allow those people any legal rights, any real legal remedies, or anything that the white man, so-called white man, had to abide by, except for unless it was a treaty. But they looked at all the slaves as somebody who was not covered under any treaty. So the Moors definitely played a part in that way. Not to mention that the Moors, was allowing them on the land in the first place through the treaty. The treaty was allowing, Europeans to settle here without any chaos or, pretty much at peace. That's what that treaty was doing for them. But
you know what? That would be good something to look up to, though. But I wonder if the people who was doing the trading back then had any other treaty. It's very possible. It's very possible. I think they had some type of because they're doing a great job of the Moorish stuff. Because a lot of people don't even ain't even aware of that.
Nah, but I really don't think it was no other treaties that, as far as blacks had. But now there are treaties with African nations that they had, but I don't think there was any treaties with the United States and any other African nations. But there were treaties with Europeans and African nations, which they often broke them. But but I don't think that's what I'm saying. There wasn't any treaty, and that's what I think that they were saying. It was like, well, there was no treaties that or any laws that any white man would abide by for a black person. I mean, that's what he was saying in his dissertation of the case that Dred Scott case. You know what I'm saying? That's what he was saying, and so he basically put slaves as property, and that, hey, we got the right to life, liberty, and property, so we got the life to so he basically justified chattel slavery. He justified it. Okay, and that's really why they had the 14th Amendment. They created the 14th Amendment to try to counterbalance that court case law, or that court case, because that court case became precedent. That became the standard. Oh, okay, well, blacks is property, and that was in 1856. You know what I mean? So that was like a few years before the Civil War. But there was a whole issue with, like I said, property. Because, I mean, that's another thing. The Southerners were they were scared of giving up their property. And like in that article that I read, he was saying that, these farmers, even up in Maine, the farmers in Maine were scared, he said, basically, that there was going to be a loss of their land, which is property. Go back to property. And like I said, when we look at today, we don't own anything. And I mean, like I said, King Abeda done a lot of videos based on that. And like I said, based on me and his own dialogue between each other, they basically have understood that, man, we don't own anything. Like we don't possess the money. We don't possess the real true money to allow us to even buy something to own it, because we're not using money. It's almost like we trying to buy stuff with I don't know, with like if we going to Dave and Buster's and using coins to purchase stuff, like not real money. It's not really real money, but because it's not really real money, basically the United States is backing everything. They have to own it to back it, and they allow us to use these things that we have. But ultimately, they could seize it away from us if they wanted to.
Right.
I mean, I ain't saying that they want to, but they want us to they giving us the appearance that we own something. But we don't. Like, we don't own our cars. I mean, you have to have the manufacturer owner. You have to have that document to actually own the car. And we don't never own that. We don't have it. So even when we bought the car and paid for it, we don't own it.
So let's say you had a car and you wanted to move to Ghana, and you wanted to take your car with you. I mean, the state got the title to the car. I mean, if the state be like, nah, well, we don't want to release the title, can you still take the car? I mean, it almost seems like,
they got
to.
I don't know. It depends on Ghana, because Ghana may want to see its credentials. Like, you might be able to get it there, but will you be able to do anything with the car if the car doesn't have its credentials?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't really own it. But if you got basically, what's the registration? The registration, if you notice, you own a car, but once you register the car, the state has some vested interest in your car now. They kind of have ownership. They have some kind of ownership with you with the car, because now you're under their rules and regulations when you're driving around, because you got these registration plates on your car. And you put them plates on your car, that's another form of your car not being yours, because now you got the state plates on your car, giving them permission over your car. That's why, you get stopped and they want to ask for your registration, that if your car is not registered, they want to try to penalize you because you're not under their contract. You see, if you're not under their contract, then you're not really doing any business with them. So you really, it becomes a whole thing. But the whole fact that they it was something else we was talking about, the ownership of guns. Like, you register a gun, and the reason why we have to register all these guns that we have is because they're made by companies that are regulated by the government. So, like Smith & Wessons and all these guns that are made by gun manufacturers are all regulated by the federal government. Now, let's say you took and created your own gun by what do they do when they you can make your own materials? You can create your own stuff with the not the copier, but what do they call that when you
3D printing?
Yeah, 3D printing. Like, when you do a 3D printer, let's say you can do a 3D print of a gun, which people do. They create their own guns, has no serial number on it. None of that. It was your gun. You created it. It's not under any stipulation. You don't have no serial number on it. So you got to think about that too. Like, them guns is not really ours either, because they got serial numbers on them, because the government has mandated that. Because those guns are really under the government. But they allow us to use them and buy them and use them, but we don't necessarily still own them because they're registered. I mean, they still got a serial number on it. They go back to the company, or, you know what I mean, which is regulated by the government. So it's like, we really, all these things that we have these numbers and serial things on it, and have these links them back to somebody else that manufactured it, that really is under the government. You know what I'm saying? The government has vested interest because it owns stock in most of these major companies.
Mm-hmm. So if you could, like, what would you think be like some remedies, like, you feel you could suggest, like, I mean, because you got a lot of people who are real clever with the business, on the business side, and, you got people like Trump who can, not pay nothing in taxes. So it's obvious, and people done found some way, to at least be as secure as they can,
Right. And you're right. I mean, people who got money can shield themselves
or whatever
from it a lot better, or they use other things to do business in. Because, I mean, most of us do business in our Social Security number and all this. But people who got money, they never do business in their own Social Security number. So they're never putting themselves, which is a property, under jeopardy. They're using, like, other entities to do business in or whatnot. And that gives them more leverage, but it gives them more space between them and the state or the government. You know, it gives them more padding from not being, or protection from being attacked directly from the government. So that's why they can do all kind of stuff and they can kind of get away with it, because they don't really tie it back to their social. Like you think Bill Gates uses his Social Security number, you know, or Donald Trump for that matter? Wouldn't use it.
Don't need to.
Yeah, like they wouldn't use it, and all those things are slavery, like parts of property, like, you know, ownership, like they own us. Like, really, all they did. This is what I was gonna say before y'all said all what happened was that the South had their own property. These Southerners in these Southern states that allowed slavery, those black people were property. So the United States came in there and broke up that monopoly of slavery and property. And then they took over. The government actually took over slavery as a means of, okay, we're going to regulate, we're going to come in and break this up. We're going to become the owners of the slaves. We're going to become the owners of the property. And so that's why you got the 14th Amendment. That's the government coming in and saying, hey, we're going to make these citizens called federal United States citizens. And they're going to, and they supersede, you know what I'm saying? This supersede the state citizenship. So you guys might have been citizens of whatever state. Whoever was a citizen of Ohio, whoever was born in Ohio, it said like this. The Constitution say this, like what the 14th Amendment say. If you are born or naturalized in the state, that you are now federal citizen. So anybody that was born in any state has become a federal citizen. That means that now that you're a federal citizen or a citizen of the United States, now the federal government has regulation over you directly, because you are now a citizen under them, and that citizenship supersedes the state citizenship. So now you are property of the United States, the Congress, the property of the United States. So all those black people, you know what I'm saying, that were disenfranchised as slaves or free blacks who still wasn't protected under any legal remedies, or it was not protected under the Constitution, now become federal U.S. citizens and are now under their guise. Okay, so that's all they really did. That's all the United States did, was take the property, in my opinion, the property from the people and put it in the states, in the federal hands. And then now they use the property and everything and the people as collateral for the banking system. You know, so the Federal Reserve now comes into play, and they use us as collateral so that they can get money from the Federal Reserve, because they don't have no gold to give them. The money ain't backed by gold or silver. So what do they really have? Well, they got the property of the people. The people, right? They got the American people, and they got the property of the people. So they're the slaveholders now. See, so that's what I mean. This is the connections I was making when you know, we got to talk about the Civil War, what the Civil War really might have been about. You know, just you know, and this, like I said, it's something to think about.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, that's really important. I mean, we fed a lot of, BS, like they called it citizenship, and democracy, and they did it in the name of liberty and justice for all, and it's really a hoax. It's a hoax. So yeah, I mean, you're definitely right. I mean, it's a lot of. I mean, that's really important. I mean, for real, on so many levels, and just even being aware, because a lot of folks, their main mission in life is, some people own a house. A lot of people, I want to own a house. Well, you never really own it, because if you don't pay them taxes, it's gonna go bye-bye. I've seen it happen too many times.
Exactly. And the fact that you got these greedy bankers, and these bankers have been around in some way and form for hundreds of years. I mean, when the United States was started, Benjamin Franklin and them was like, please stay away from bankers, like big banking, like stay away. They was very adamantly against it, but over time, the American people had got into a centralized banking system. And then I think it was Andrew Jackson, which I'm not a fan of Andrew Jackson, but I'll say the only thing that Andrew Jackson did, in my opinion, one of the main, was that he got rid of the centralized banking system, like 1820s. He got rid of it. So he stopped that whole centralized banking thing all the way really up until 1900s, until the Federal Reserve Bank that we are under now came. That's a centralized bank, and when they've always been trying to take away the sovereignty. They've always been doing it, and it had been stopped, and it just, inevitably, I guess you could say, it happened anyway. But they probably, and just be funny with it, is like they might have, like, they used the Civil War, because a lot of times they use war as a tactic to get something done. They've always used war as tactics to create change and for them to get something across. Like they'll use the like Korean War, Vietnam War. They go to war in Iraq and Iran. These type of things to pass. The Patriot Act. All these things came about because of wanting to start war and causing chaos and people getting scared, and war can cause confusion. It causes sympathy. People get, causes fear. And so a lot of things can be created after that happens, or the destruction of that. Or World War One. Like World War One is always said it was used to get rid of the monarchs in the world, like all the kings and the queens. By the time after World War One, there was pretty much hardly any kings or queens that had any power. But not to cut anything short, but I know we're about time to get off this show. So
okay,
I appreciate you coming on here, man. We're gonna start the next season after this show. This is gonna be the last show. So
Okay, stop, man. Let's let you wrap it up, man.
So, all right, y'all. I appreciate all the love, man. Check me out on another show. Be a thanks, and we out. Peace. Tutanana.
Peace.
Blog Talk Radio.